when you borrow, you are agreeing to a certain interest rate that you're going to pay that borrowed money back at over a certain period of time. And the government is no different. It's just they can borrow pretty much indefinitely.
Yeah.
They don't have the time horizon. Like, we die, the creditors know that, so they have to get their money back by a certain period of time. Countries, they're going to keep going on well past generations, so they know that they're going to get the money. The problem is that when you're spending, like, you don't think that there's any kind of consequence, then the debt servicing ratio to the amount of money you're actually earning, it's what's killing us right now, right? So then you have to raise taxes in order to service the debt, and then you have to spend more on infrastructure and spend more on public housing and spend more on all these things that you mentioned, because the population is just basically dying under the amount of debt that you're taxing them on. And so it just kind of creates this snowball effect where it's like, crap, our debt servicing is way too high, so we're spending billions on servicing this debt, so we have to borrow more to help the Canadians that we're then taxing to then try and service this debt, which then we're borrowing more. So it's ludicrous. And so when I hear this kind of thing, when they're like, it's not the same as personal debt, it's like, you're kind of half right, because no, it's not the same in that, there's no finality to it. And creditors are not worried about the country not paying back its debt. But the problem is that it's not infinite money. And I think that that's what our government right now thinks it is and has kind of lost the plot on that.
Something I really get frustrated by are just thinking that the money that is being used is the government's money.
Yeah.
Like, I hate this idea that we keep normalizing how much we're being taxed, because it's not normal. Like, income tax is relatively new. It came out during the World War, and to be able to service the war effort. And then it kept going up since, and kept going up and kept going up and kept going up to the point where I'm like, I'm looking at your T4. You're just like, gee, wow, the government's really taking a lot. They really got to service a lot of debt. And it really kind of frustrates me, especially when we kind of run this fractional reserve banking system is what's allowed this to happen. And I'm just kind of over the idea of like, yeah, like we want to do all these things. We of course we want pharmacare, of course we want healthcare, of course we want all these things. But the mentality is never, let's use the money that we have at our disposal to make it super impactful. It's always, we got to ask for more money from these people to be able to do these things. And then they try to sell in such a way so they can take that money. So that's where I just get frustrated in general. I'm like, I'm just done with normalizing taxes. It's time to how about we start reducing taxes to the point where it's a little more sustainable from a personal perspective, but also sustainable for the government to at least keep the specific services that we do enjoy running. But like the idea of like getting the point of taxing someone 50% on their friggin' after income tax is crazy to me.
Yeah.
And then the HST and all the garbage comes up on top of that. Just screw off.
And so what's interesting is I did do a little bit of a deep dive, and this comes from a bit of a personal note because my family has a business, and they're talking about where to locate the business. Do we keep it in Canada where it's currently located? Do we move it to Wyoming? Do we move it to the Caribbean? Do we move it to Ireland? And they're having this conversation seriously, and they're not making stupid amounts of money. They're a small business by every metric. And so they're having these conversations. And so I was saying like, why? And so I was talking to them. I was talking to other two small business owners, and they were just saying that the taxes that you pay in corporate income tax is just untenable. It's too much. And they said that, Nova Scotia is one of the worst offenders. And so when I did some digging into it, I was looking at just a comparison first of like personal income taxes and corporate income taxes in Nova Scotia compared to Alberta. And so I've always been of the belief, like the liberal mindset of like, these evil corporations, tax the crap out of them because they're just making stupid amounts of money, and we need to use that money for the benefit of the public because they're soaking us. And one of the things that I find interesting is that when you look at a province like Alberta, who is not drawing from equalization, I go, okay, well, how are they funding things? And so when you look at their income taxes, so their income tax on $100,000, 10%. In Nova Scotia, 13.8%. So you're making $100,000, you're paying almost $4,000 more in taxes than you would if you lived in Alberta, just by virtue of living in two different places. If you have a small business in Alberta, you're only paying 2% provincial taxes on your business. If you live in Nova Scotia, you're paying 2.5. And so that doesn't seem like a whole lot, but then when you add the federal taxes on top of that, it becomes obscene. You've got 9% federal tax on top of that. So that's a company who's making $500,000 or less. As soon as you make $500,001 in Alberta, you're paying 8% tax. In Nova Scotia, you're paying 14.
Gee.
Why would a business set up shop in Nova Scotia when they say, I can pay 8% in Alberta or 14 in Nova Scotia? And then that's not even to add in the 38% base tax that you'd be paying to the federal government on top of that. But that changes because then you have an abatement program that would bring it down to 28. But that doesn't count on exports because we don't want to be exporting products out of the country, obviously, because we don't want to bring in money from outside of our borders. That would just be foolish.
Who wants that?
Yeah. And then also if you are a zero emission technology company, then you only pay 7.5%. So
nice.
Good for VW in Ontario. They don't have to pay very much on their battery plant. And then there's a weird general tax reduction that applies that doesn't apply if you're a small business or your energy generation, your investment income, mortgage corp, mutual fund, personal services. It's so much like just intricacy for no reason. And then you look at Ireland, and Ireland says, you can set up shop here. You can make as much as you want, 12.5% flat.
Amazing.
So why would any business pick Canada over Ireland? And why would any business pick Nova Scotia over Alberta? And these are the businesses that we need to create jobs to sustain our economy and to actually pay for the things. Otherwise, these companies are just going to find every loophole going because they don't want to pay an absurd amount. And it's companies big all the way down to the mom and pop. And it's just like, it makes sense. Like, I get it, why you would do that. But it's like, we have to actually look at lowering our corporate income tax slowly over time at the same time as lowering our personal income tax. Like you said, finding money within our own budgets right now to sustain the things that we have, not adding more to it, unfortunately, and get to a point where we start to revamp our economy, where we're actually bringing in businesses and people are looking at our province going, oh, this is a good place to set up shop. Instead of right now what's happening, where I know 3 businesses just in my network who've all moved their businesses out, one to Ireland, one to Wyoming in the States, and then another one they haven't decided. So it's like, that's money directly coming out. And then what do you have to do? You have to raise personal income tax because the people haven't left yet. Mm-hmm. And that's how you fund your programs.